peace building, confidence building, and reconciliation. So much important information has already been shared. For the sake of time, I will not repeat them and try to be as brief as possible. Ladies and gentlemen, as it has already been discussed, there are two distinct reasons for which resolving cases of missing persons as consequence of conflict is of utmost importance. The first one is humanitarian, which means for the sake of the families of those who went missing. Why? Because these families have in their turn become emotionally hostages and thus victims of the war, even if they were not personally targeted, since the fate of their kins remain unknown. Even if the hostilities cease until the whereabouts of their missing relatives are located, their mind, their emotions and feelings will not rest in peace. In armed conflicts, unfortunately, there are always a large number of persons who disappear, either in detention or are victims of fatality and are declared as missing. Each missing person has a family, friends, neighbors, colleagues, acquaintances, which in total makes a considerable portion of the society affected by this scourge. Unless these people's years of agony is in a certain way relieved by establishing the fate of their missing persons, by returning them hopefully alive, released from detention, or, unfortunately, the return of the remains of those who were killed to their families in order to finally mourn the proven loss of their beloved and at last try to move forward with their own daily lives. For them, thus a large fraction of the society, the hostilities are yet not over. They may even turn against their own people in charge, questioning them and demanding justice by asking it to do more in locating the whereabouts of their loved ones. These are not soldiers or military groups which will return to barracks when the ceasefire is declared. These are large groups of citizens in the society who should also feel the hostilities are finally finished and it is time for reconciliation. They should first reconcile with their situation and their own inner self. In order to achieve this, the authorities should provide them with medical assistance, psychological support to help them to come to terms with their sufferings and daily trauma endured for years and even decades. They should be offered reparation and compensation by honoring each one of the missing persons in a ceremony, and also, why not, erecting a monument in their names, in their memory. If the budgetary situation of the state allows, the families should also receive financial compensation. Ladies and gentlemen, the second reason for the importance of establishing the fate of those who went missing during the conflict is political. The discussions between the parties after the end of the war cannot be only about stepping back from each other's territory. This has to also include returning each other's national, whether alive or dead. This can be the first step of confidence building between the former enemies, who are now in peace-building process to finally make peace. They should, of course, release and return all prisoners of war, but also should share their respective data, including the list of those who were killed, as well as the exact site of their burial. Cooperation in resolving such a humanitarian issue is a sign of the willingness of the parties to restore a sustainable peace. If there is a hindrance from one side or all factions, either for political or military interest, then international organizations should step in as intermediaries to ensure that under their auspices, the resolution of cases of missing persons is conducted in a transparent and impartial manner. The international organizations should proactively use diplomatic venues and, if necessary, other tools, such as adoption of United Nations resolutions to ensure that parties commit to prioritize addressing cases of missing persons by establishing their fate for the sake of the families, but also for the sake of confidence building between themselves as well as between their communities, to be able to reconcile, which in turn results in the restoration of a sustainable peace. For this reason, it is essential that each peace agreement comprises a clause on locating the fate of the missing persons, as there is no peace, therefore no peace building possible until, as we discussed, these families finally feel at peace within themselves. As we know, Article 5, Paragraph 2 in Annex 7 of the General Framework Agreement for Peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina, known as the Dayton Agreement, explicitly requires that, quote, "The parties shall cooperate fully with the International Committee for Red Cross in its efforts to determine the identities, whereabouts, and fate of the unaccounted for," unquote. The United Nations also established a special process dealing with missing persons in the territory of the former Yugoslavia, solely dedicated in facilitating the cooperation between the commissions on missing persons of the various entities and provide forensic experts to locate mass graves for excavation, exhumation, and identification of remains. In conclusion, ladies and gentlemen, in post-conflict, establishing the whereabouts of the missing persons is the cornerstone for confidence building between the factions and also reconciliation between their societies. Thus, the international organizers and mediators should use all available means to promote transparent and sincere cooperation between the parties to prioritize the resolution of cases of missing persons in the peace-building process to achieve a sustainable peace. Thank you very much for your attention.